we've got a fantastic 10-minute video that was pre-recorded, which is from Rob Ellis, who is a mussels expert, talking from the perspective of a scientist. I think that would be a really lovely thing to put in now for 10 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes for questions, open questions. So if you'd like to think of something you'd like to talk about or share after this film, I think that would work. What do you think, Richard?
I think that sounds great. Yeah.
Okay, would you be able to queue up Rob's film? Thank you.
So my name's Dr. Rob Ellis. I'm a marine biologist at the University of Exeter. And when Anne-Marie and Joe asked me to take part in this high water event as part of Tidelines, it's something I was really keen to do, because the tides have really been fundamental in driving my passion for the ocean, as well as in determining the direction my career has taken. So as a young boy, it was really the kind of rock pooling with my family that drove my passion for marine biology and my desire to follow this career path. And I suppose most fundamentally, this has come from the alien world that you're exposed to at low tide, the incredible organisms that you can encounter at the lowest of tides, those different species that would be otherwise hidden and you wouldn't know were there. And also that fundamental inquisitiveness of understanding how do different organisms cope in this alien world. So here you've got organisms exposed to a whole range of different conditions. They can be subtidal at one point, so anemones is a really good example. They're soft, squidgy, seemingly very vulnerable organisms that are great to touch. They stick to your finger and they're really good fun. But at high tide, they're these jelly blobs exposed to the air, and you wonder, how can they do that? How can an organism that gets their oxygen and their food from water cope when exposed to air? The same as barnacles at the very highest of the tide, at the tidal range, exposed to air for the longest period of time. These little hard calcareous organisms that open up to filter feed from the water column. But the stresses they're predominantly exposed to are the air and that kind of everything that comes with it. That exposure to the warming rays of the sun and the inability to feed for long periods of time. But the one that really kind of drove my fascination most was bivalve shellfish. Again, understanding how they have to interact with different phases of the tide. High tide, when they're exposed and inundated with water, and they open up and they can filter feed, and watching them do it was a real kind of joy and a kind of something I continue to do with my career to date. But then when the tide goes out and when they clamp up, understanding how do they do that? How can they close up, stop breathing, stop filter feeding and getting what they need from the water column, and just sit there shut until the next tide comes in. And it's really this interaction that's driven my passion, an understanding of how does an organism cope in its environment. And that's what I study today as a physiologist. Equally, the tides have driven my passion and my interaction with the ocean in far more diverse ways. As a swimmer and as a surfer, it's that intrigue watching and anticipating. You know that there's a wave system, a storm system coming through, and it's predicted that there's going to be different waves in different locations. And then having that understanding of how the water motion and the waves interact at different states of the tide and predicting where those waves might break best. And then that anticipation with friends driving down to have a surf session and waiting for the conditions to get right, the tide to drop far enough for that wave to start breaking, and have you got it right? And perhaps we did that a little bit too much whilst I was at university instead of studying, but it really drove that passion in my interaction with the ocean. But more importantly, I think understanding these ecosystems and their habitats have been fundamental to help me understand how humans are interacting with the marine environment, and driven my passion to really showcase what role marine organisms can kind of provide in cleaning up these ecosystems, and also as a showcase and as a good news story to try and engage the human population and local communities to really protect the environment and understand what impacts we're having. And I think bivalves and mussels and oysters are a really good example of that, and how we can utilise a species that plays such an important role in these coastal ecosystems, but also can really highlight and showcase the impact as humans we're having on those ecosystems, and therefore navigating and signposting ways in which we might be able to overcome those challenges. So if we imagine the mussel beds in the ex-estuary, you've obviously got the farmed mussels that are predominantly subtidal, or intertidal mussels on Bull Bank and on Star Cross. Now these are really important organisms for biodiversity, So mussels are ecosystem engineers. They sit down on the seabed and they attach with byssus threads, so those little fine threads that they stick out. And as a mussel bed grows and accretes and you have more and more mussels, you create this biogenic habitat. So it's a habitat created by living organisms. But more importantly than the mussels that settle there, this creates a habitat for other organisms. So around 300 species can be supported by any one mussel bed. So they're providing a surface area and hiding places for a whole array of organisms that otherwise wouldn't be in the ecosystem. Mussels are also a really important food source for overwintering birds, migratory birds, to get the fuel they need to be able to carry on with their journey. They also play a vital role in bioremediation. So bivalves are what's called an extractive species. They take resources from the environment and lock them up. Now, predominantly that's microalgae and nutrients. So they're taking out these small phytoplankton particles, small marine plants, and using that as their food source. In addition to that, whilst they're filter feeding, they're removing far more from the water column. Pesticides, bacteria, even microplastics. So they can be removing these products from the water and helping to clean up that environment. And in many places around the world, mussels are actually employed to clean up water columns. So in Hong Kong Harbour, for example, mussels and oysters are being reseeded out to clean up that environment and reduce the human impact and restore the ecosystem to a better state. They're also being used as bioindicators. So in places around the world, you can use mussels as a way of indicating where that human impact's greatest. So you can periodically sample mussels for different compounds such as bisphenol A or microplastics to see where they're accumulating, and that really indicates where the human impact's greatest. You can also look for the impact of bacteria, so you can study populations of E. coli and highlight where sewage outflows have overflown and that impact's having a greatest direct impact on those marine ecosystems. So these are really important organisms that help remove those products from the environment, those compounds and those pathogens, to really make it a better environment for other species and also for humans. So people who use the environment recreationally really rely on this as an ecosystem service that mussels and other species can provide to clean that environment up. And as a researcher, I'm really passionate about showcasing the role that bivalves and other extractive species such as oysters and seagrass can have in restoring those environments. And I think as a community, that's something we really need to get around and really promote as a way of restoring those environments and mitigating our impact. They're also a really important food source. Obviously, bivalves are kind of a fundamental aquaculture species. It's the second largest farm species across the UK. It's the largest farm species in Europe. So there's a really important source of really sustainably farmed, healthy seafood. And I think we don't eat enough seafood in the UK, actually. I'd really promote that we eat more. But understanding the role of the tides on this species is vital. So if we think about the humble mussel, we've already talked about the fact that they extract their food from the water column. And when they're intertidal, so when they're exposed to air at low tide, this influences the amount of time they can spend extracting that food from the water column. The tides also challenge and change the predators they're exposed to. So intertidally, so those mussels exposed to air have to face predation by birds, those migratory overwintering birds picking on them, but those exposed at low tide have to cope with different predators, maybe crabs and starfish. And this can really drive and change the morphology of those organisms. More importantly, the tides are fundamental for driving the biology of those populations in terms of their life cycle. So mussels are a broadcast spawning organism. So they release their eggs and sperm into the water column where they mix and produce larvae. These larvae then stay in that water column for about 2 to 3 weeks before they settle on a new reef. Now what happens therefore is those tides are washing those larvae in and out of the estuary and around the coastal region and connecting different mussel populations together, really mixing the mussel species that we have around our coast. Subsequently, on the correct tide, they'll then move back into the estuary or move to different coastal regions and settle down and create that new generation. So tides really are fundamental for everything in terms of the biology of those mussels. And really, importantly, this is ingrained in their biology. So as recent research has shown, if you take mussels away from the environment, an intertidal environment, and take them into the laboratory and maintain them subtidally, so if you maintain them in conditions where they're permanently submerged, that tidal rhythm is ingrained in their behaviour and their gene expression, so how they express their genes and the different biological functions that controls. So bivalves in terms of oysters and mussels will open up obviously periodically to filter feed from the water column. Now those that are exposed to low tide, exposed to air at low tide I should say, keep the behaviour, and they'll open up less in periods of low tide even when they're permanently submerged following that lunar cycle. And coincidentally that gene expression follows that same tidal pattern even when you take them into the laboratory. So this really shows how fundamental the tides are for the biology of bivalves and also our understanding of marine ecosystems. Hopefully what I've shown you here is kind of my passion for the marine environment and my real connection through both my research and also through my kind of wider interest in marine ecosystems as to why I think tides are fundamental for the ex-estuary and the populations of species that they contain, and also for our understanding of how we can utilise different species to our good to improve these environments and really help restore and mitigate human impact. I thank you for listening and hope you found this an interesting talk.
Thanks, Rob. He's actually out in the field today. He wanted to be with us, but he's actually, I think, collecting spawning mussels today, which is why he can't be here. So, Richard, we've got a little bit of time now. If there was something that somebody wanted to reflect on, people that have been listening, it could be a moment where you unmute and share a reflection or a question with us.
You can ask Peter if he wants to raise his.
While you're thinking about that, Pete Moser has sent us a request for help him make a song lyric.
It's a very simple song lyric. It's a song that's been. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
It's a song that we started writing. I've got the light behind me. We have written over the years in different places, but it's basically I'll just get. There's a refrain that goes, when you live by the side of the sea, you can swim in the sea, fish for fish. When you live by the side of the sea, you can see the weather coming in. When you live by the side of the sea. So just keep throwing lines in, and then later on when I'm doing my little session of songs, I can add them and collect them all together. Okay, so that's it. You can be in any languages. It'd be nice to have some Welsh away, and I don't know where you are, but
there's some Scots there.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
In my dreams, speaking Welsh, I'm afraid to say.
Anyone else like to come in with?
I just thinking, I got my bookshelf behind the computer I'm looking at. Lyle Watson wrote Supernature in the 1970s. It was a very strange and innovative book, but he talked about the mussels and opening and closing and experiments people did in America in the 1970s when they took mussels from the coast to some university in the middle of America and watched what they did and how they kept their rhythm.
Yeah, that whole idea of gene memory is really quite a striking idea, and I wonder if it applies to other life forms, or whether this is a kind of specific to a marine organism.
There's some, I can't remember the word for it, but there's some theory of human evolution that we evolved by the coast, partly because eating shellfish was such a pretty easy food resource at low tide. Homo something or other, I don't know.
No, I don't know that either. How are we doing so far? Is everybody having a good time? We've had a remarkably, shouldn't say this, touch wood, we've had a remarkably clear tech run so far, apart from there's a few struggles from Naomi. It was interesting to hear about HMS Terror, because I have been watching the Terror series on the BBC. So it was interesting to hear some more of the story about HMS Terror.
So I don't keep jumping in too much, but there's quite a lot of stuff about ice and tides and mollusks, in fact. And at low tide, some of the Inuit go under the ice sheet to collect mollusks, and it's a very risky thing to do, and only possible at the very low tides. And there's amazing film you can look at on YouTube, and crawling around in the space between the seabed, which is empty, and the ice sheet above them.
We have an artist joining us from Newfoundland later in the day. She's probably well tucked in bed by now, at the moment still, but she's going to be, not surprisingly, talking a lot about ice and how much ice is a huge part of the way of life if you live on a small island that far north. Although interestingly, if you look at the map, the UK is basically on the same latitude as Newfoundland, and yet our weather, because of the Gulf Stream, is entirely different. So it's interesting to think about that when we are talking to Marlene in Newfoundland later on.
Sorry, what is her name? Marlene.
Her name is Marlene Creates, and she's lived in Newfoundland, I think, if not all her life, then a very long time.
Fabulous.
So
Yeah.
she's lived with the ice a great deal.
Richard, it's Marlene Creates. She hates
It's Creates.
People say creates.
Yeah, I've always called her the wrong name.
Yes.
So Creates actually makes a bit more sense. Yeah. Thank you for correcting me there.
Well, make sure I'm around for that.
Yeah.
What's interesting, I thought the comment earlier on about, sorry, please forgive me, the names are blurring at the moment, but the young lady from Scotland, and just being 4 miles away from the coast, it really is, I can really understand that. When we moved to here, we had to be within walking distance of the seafront. I mean, we can't afford to be on the seafront, but it just had to be within walking distance. And there is something about being close to the edges that so many people enjoy, don't they, in this country? And for a period, I lived in the Midlands years and years ago in Coventry, and I hated it. I absolutely hated being so far away from it, and walking around a lake at the time wasn't enough. It had to be the coast. So
I
Hi,
live
Chris. Hi, sorry, that was me. I don't know if you can hear me.
yeah,
but,
sorry. I forgot
yeah.
your name.
It's okay. It's Natalie. Hello. Yeah, it's funny. 4 miles. It's really not that far away at all, and yet it feels tremendous. It feels like such a great distance. And I think it is because I'm so spoiled, I think, to be in Edinburgh, which is quite a small city, and it lends itself to the ocean. It's right there. I'm a half an hour walk away from the sea, and here it's impossible to walk to it. So it's a bit frustrating. It should be easy, but it isn't. And it's one of those things. I always thought I'd be a bit more of a country girl, and I'm definitely finding, actually, no, I'm not. I really have this need to be by the water's edge. So I'm going back to Edinburgh next week, and I'm very, very excited about it. I think one of the first things I'll be doing is heading to the beach.
I lived for my sins, I lived in Ohio for a while, which of course is near Lake Erie. So is it the Great Lakes? Near one of the Great Lakes. And I remember the experience of going out to Kelly's Island, which is a small inhabited island on the lake, and having a very bizarre experience of seeing what looked like a seascape, because it's a vast lake. So, you're not on the lake's edge, you can't see anything else but water. But there were no waves, and it was all completely wrong. It smelled wrong. And I was really disturbed by it, by this giant body of non-saline water that didn't behave like an ocean. It was all wrong. So terribly wrong. Yeah.
Hey, it's time to move on to Alison in our rolling tide of speakers. So if we can.
Lovely.
Alison, are you there? Thanks.
I'm here, yeah, hello.
Hello.
Great.
Hi, will I have screen sharing? So I've got some images that I'd love to share with everybody.
Yes, I will get you there in 1 second.
Thank you.
Okay, you've now got permission to do that.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some work that I'm doing around sea level rise. So I grew up near the mouth of the River Severn and the River Wye, at the estuary where the rivers meet the sea. So as I'm sure a lot of you know, the Severn estuary has the second highest tidal range in the world. So I was quite aware from an early age of the changes the water would bring to the landscape with every tidal cycle. And I live by the sea in Kent now, and I'm a regular sea swimmer. So the tide times of the English Channel are very much a focus of my daily routines. So I suppose it's no surprise that I'm embracing the changing nature of the tides in my work as well. I'm an artist. I create site-responsive installations and performance work. And my latest piece, The Future Wales Coast Path, addresses sea level rise and asks us to reflect on the impermanence of land and how we might adapt as more of the land we take for granted is reclaimed by the sea. So I'm just going to show you, hopefully, a map, if I can. Let's just take a step back. Okay. So this is a map of a journey that I took, spending 3 days walking the route of where the sea is predicted to reach in the future, following the edges of the flood risk map for the Gwent levels, within which sit farms, ancient churches, villages, power stations, and the city of Newport. And as I walked, I realised that the story is really obvious when you travel through the space. The flatness of the land is inescapable. It sits below sea level rise for most of that area. The scale of potential loss is immense, and the appreciation for what is within that landscape is really brought into sharp relief when walking through it. This image, hopefully this is showing the right image.
We can only see a little tiny bit of that for some reason.
Okay, let's try again.
That's good.
There we go. Okay, so this is the seawall at Redwick. So on the final day of my walk, I walked out to Redwick, arriving at the shore at high tide. And you can hopefully see in that picture, there's a seawall. It looks a bit smaller in the picture than it actually is, but it's like a big ridge and you walk up to it. And as we approached the seawall, we were hit in the face by a wave. But we'd only got about halfway up it and this huge wave came crashing over, absolutely soaked. And it just really made me realize that what I thought was some way in the future is actually closer than I was ready for, and than I think probably a lot of people are ready for as well. So that really kind of set me on my journey towards this piece of work. Just looking now for the other image that I'd like to share with you. Let's see, is that sharing? Yeah, okay. So what I'm looking at creating is a lighthouse to represent this future Wales coast path. And the lighthouse is sited on the shore of the future Wales coastline, approximately 2 miles from the current shore in the village of Mega. The light responds to tidal data from the Bay of Bengal, where communities in the Sundarbans are facing huge challenges from sea level rise. And actually, you'll hear from my colleague Vikram later in the day more about that. The removal of the mangroves there in favour of man-made sea defence is, of course, huge problems. And we're doing similar things here in the UK. The tidal data from rising tides and storm surges in the area of the Bay of Bengal will cause this lighthouse to flash a warning signal that predicts our future and reminds us that we have much to learn from those on the front line of climate crisis. So I'll show you what the lighthouse looks like. Okay, so this is the lighthouse. And the idea is that this is a space for pilgrimage, for people to walk from the current shoreline to the future. And it's also a space for reflection. What I really wanted was to offer visitors the same physical and emotional experience that I had when I was developing this idea, when I was walking this route. So I really want to invite people to take a journey from the current coastline inwards to the future edge of the land, to feel the distance of that journey in their bodies and the expanse of what may one day be reclaimed by the sea, to move from the present to the future, and to know that change will come to this place that they pass through. And when they arrive at the lighthouse, to hopefully there meet fellow travellers, to jointly reflect on how we might adapt to the future of higher seas and less land. And then to walk back to the coast, arriving at high water, where the realities of the challenges ahead and the swiftness and ferocity of their approach is really clear to see. So the work is about many things. It's about our need to adapt to what lies in front of us as we continue to build homes on floodplains. Just gonna stop screen sharing. So it's about those challenges. It's about responsibility, and it's about the part that we have to play, not only in preventing future sea level rise, but also in what choices we want to make now in response to the changes already set in motion. And that doesn't always mean building a concrete sea defence, because there's only so high you can build a wall before it starts to get a bit silly. It's also about our global connections, understanding that the water that touches our shores has touched those in other places as well. It's touched those that we see on the news, a tsunami there, devastating flood there. Perhaps we can learn something from those people who've experienced those disasters. What would they like to share with us? What would they like to happen next? What would they do differently if they had the chance? So I feel like we have a chance to do things differently. And I'd like this work to be about hope for all of us coming together to take on this challenge. So what I'm making, it's not a finished work at the moment. The first lighthouse will hopefully be installed on the Gwent levels this summer, alongside a programme of community-based walks. And then there's possibilities for expansion around Wales and around other places if it's successful. The global connection needs to be more fully explored and investigated. And I think even now, a year into the process, I've got more questions than answers. And the biggest question really is what to do with this knowledge of impermanence, which is really much bigger than an artwork could ever encompass. And so that's really something that I'd like to hand over to you, the audience. So I'm just going to end with a little question. I'm just going to share this on the screen. This is a question that I feel is really important. If only I could get the question to come up, that'd be really good. Okay.
If you like, you can tell us a question. We can put it in the chat.
I have found it.
Yeah, you found it. Well done.
Maybe we can put it in the chat as well. Okay. So there's the question. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Alison. That was great. We will put that. Perhaps one of the team can type that into the chat while we listen. But this is the land on which we stand is as impermanent as the tides. You've reached the future shoreline. There are no instructions. It is up to all of us to decide what to do next. That's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. We will, if Susie is ready, we will go on to Susie. Are you there? Yeah, Susie is there.
Hello, hi.
Hey, Susie.
Can you see me?
Not yet. Yes, there we can. Yeah, there you are.
Hello, welcome to my studio. Once I set up a makeshift studio in the large attic of my old family home. It was years ago now, and I was sheltering after a stormy time in my life. I was so happy to be back on the River Dart. which throughout my childhood I held close to me as my lifeline to the sea being true home, pole star, as in directs your path and pulls you forward. The attic had a floor-level window, just the size of a curled-up woman, and a small but serious black bear that befriended her. It could have been a dog, no one quite knows. This window is high up, and looks out over, almost hovering above the river and its confluence with the Wash, a smaller river that joins it beneath an ancient stone bridge, where the brown trout weave silty shadows into sunlight. When I was making my work in the attic, my lover would phone me. And after our hellos, he would say, "The tide's out, isn't it?" "How do you know?" "I can hear it in your voice," he'd say. At low tide, the curlews and the sandpipers seemed to cry wistful, and something would tear inside. Other times when my lover calls, he guesses when the tide is in. When the tide is high, you can hear it in your voice. It's all excitement. Now the years have flowed by and I've slipped downstream to be closer to the sea. Here, the wading birds of low tide, their cries are no longer plaintive, aching, longing, but are all the revelatory, expansive joy of home. And I notice that the sea calls me more than ever. So I make my work here with him at his tidal edge, our tidal edge, where we meet, our confluence. I make my work in the sea, under the sea, with the sea. We collaborate, and in the odd storm, he will take a good many of the paperworks away with him, leaving ripped scraps in my hand. It's only fair, I owe him my life. I've been dragged out in rips a few times now, but so far I've always made it back. And this remarkable winter, I make it back to the shore to find he has taken away the old migraines too. This remarkable winter, like so many other souls, I swim most days, leaving the shore to swim with a friend, a neighbour, a cormorant, a local seal, and more recently with an otter. On the odd occasion I forget to look at the tide tables. I find it funny that the moment I make it to the water's edge, if the tide's not in, it's coming in. You can hear it first in his voice. It's all excitement, even before he moves. Tide must be under the skin. The high tide mark brings gifts, arrangements of gathered and sorted material along the rack line, where particles and objects of differing sizes and densities are graded. Fine, sparkling mica with bonfire ash, laminaria saccharina with sugar sachet, picture stone with gannet skull, the irreverence. I see the shore as shore of the self, ourselves, a threshold place where we meet, overlap, and blur identities. All that who is who seems churlish. So on the shore, with my clothes, I leave my name. The work I make is not as myself, but as sea self. We work together. I commune with water to learn water's language, and lately I've been learning tide. In the studio, I lose my own language and learn tides. I practice tidal intonations and asides, emphases, and the left unsaid. subjects rearranged and flipped, reflective, using fluid pigment on paper in place of the literal. And I take the paper as nominal skin, the shore of us. No man's land. I am sea, I am tide, and I paint as tide painting, painting the language of tide coming up to high water. And then there's all that subsiding, the ebb. I hold the paper and hold vigil in my hands till temporal liquid evaporates, till rack lines hold like faith, and the paint dries. My arms ache. I have no idea why I'm doing this. It feels important, necessary. No one has seen this latest series yet. You are the first, and here is one of them.
Thank you, Susie. Can you tell us more what we are? Can you tell us a bit more about the piece behind you? Because obviously we can see it, but not as well as we should be able to see it.
Yes, maybe I could try and show you up closer.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, lovely. Okay. Yeah, go. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, these are lines of tidal marks that I've mimicked here in the studio, having observed them. And the different pigments separate into different layers and levels. And is that good? Can you see that?
That's great, absolutely great. We could really see that, yeah.
So I've been mimicking tide. And yeah.
So is this on paper?
It's on paper, yeah, on paper.
Yeah, yeah.
Lots of the time I work down by the sea, but for this series, I worked in the studio. I went down to the sea in the morning and I'd come back and mimic the tide and the drying and the rack line, the high tide point that Harriet.
I love that there are so many different names for that line. The rack line, there's the split line, there's all kinds of, there's tide line. Yeah. It's one of those wonderful words that one of those things that has so many words attached to it.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And tell us about the depth gauge on your stepping stones there.
Depth gauge. This is from down the river on the Dart. My neighbour who looked after the stepping stones in Tuckenhay, he was making a new depth gauge, but this is one from my childhood, from crossing over the stones, so you'd know where the high tide was.
Yeah.
And he was throwing this one away and replacing it with a new one, so I had to have it, and it lives in my studio now.
It's quite scary to think you'd have a metre and a half of water on top of your stepping stones.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not uncommon. We'd often skip days of school because the bus couldn't get through.
Yes.
Which was fabulous.
There's a lovely comment from Carolyn Black, who's also a printmaker, who says the dark area really sucks the eye in. And it does. It's very, very three-dimensional. It's very black hole-ish. It's lovely.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Susie.
Thank you.
We are going to go to Linda Ward. Linda is joining us and is just going to introduce film.
Hello, I'm Linda Ward. I'm an artist filmmaker and I live in Wembury. Wembury Beach is about 1 kilometre wide. It's sand and it's rock, and at low tide there are rock pools to explore. It's got a stream that crosses the beach to the ocean, and most days I follow this stream to the ocean, and dotted along beside the stream are hydrangea bushes. Now I note that hydrangea has the word hydra in it, hydra meaning water in Greek, and that led me, in the light of climate change and rising sea levels, to imagine the waters differently, as you'll see in the film that follows.
Linda, we've got you now. Thank you. Well, it was nice to see it first. We can back introduce it.
Thank you, Richard. Just to say, I live in Wembury and I live very close to the water, obviously, and I've lived by the sea all my life with my son, and he's 14 now. So I was imagining what Wembury would be like when he's in his 30s. And there's, I looked at the Climate Central coastal risk screening tool and put the slider to 2050 and was quite concerned to see that the beach was submerged, really. I do this walk which goes through the village. The stream goes right the way through Wembury, and then it has this delicious moment where it travels across the beach and meets the sea. And at that point, you know, you've got this cross overlap, which is interesting to experience. But it felt that along the way, these hydrangeas that have got their toes in the earth and the water, by 2050, I feel that they may be, you know, that it will be more than their toes in the water. So it was sort of with that in mind that the film was made. So anyway, I won't go on because I know you've got ever such a lot of material to get through, but thank you for letting me join you today, Richard.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad we were able to share the film, and thanks for coming in and joining us, however briefly. Great, thank you very much. So that allows us time to revisit Kathy. Kathy, are you there? Yes?
Hello, hi.
Oh.
Well, that's been really enjoyable tuning in and listening to and looking at tide lines and thinking about hydrangeas. So yeah, I'm here sitting in Bristol. I'm just going to flip my camera around. So things have changed a lot. Tide is going out. It's about halfway out. And so yeah, today we listened underwater, and I just want to share another little listening experiment around the idea of the Avon Gorge and its tidal range. So I brought with me, if I can just get the camera in the right place, I brought with me a music box. And I use this music box to play images of maps and other things. So I've got an 18th century map showing the Avon Gorge going into Bristol. So let's have a listen to this graphic score. So that was us arriving in Bristol, and I just thought I'd play another graphic score going from Bristol back out to the port of Avon, up to date version. It's amazing how many times the sort of rivers within the city have been rerouted and culverted and shifted around because of the urban development. Anyway, let's have a listen. And if I've got time, I just wanted to share. So I've got another graphic score because I'm a bit of a twitcher as well as a water listener. And so this is a photograph of starlings that I took actually at Ham Wall on the Somerset Levels, where there's lots of murmurations over the winter. And there, in the past, I know that people have told me that there's been lots of murmurations of starlings in the winter on the estuary as well, but I haven't seen any. I don't know if they still congregate there. Maybe someone who knows can tell me. Anyway, so here's a photograph, a freeze frame of a starling flock. We'll listen to that. Dramatic opening. thank you for the starling song. And let's have another look at the tide doing here. So yeah, the mud starting to show there. It's exciting. So yeah, that's my little 5-minute contribution of listening to Avon Gorge.
Thank you, Kathy. It was lovely to hear, not only kind of hear a sonic representation of those images, but this beautiful, gentle sound against the manic cityscape behind you. It was really nice. So we will see you in a while when water is presumably even lower. That's great. Thank you very much. We'll see you again in a bit.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. So I want to introduce, we've got 3 people joining us now. So we've got Vicky, who we've got here on the screen, and then Vikram Iyengar and Lav Kanoi should be there as well. So if we can spotlight all 3, is everybody in the session?
Hello. Hi everyone. Thank you, Richard. Oh, that was really special to see and hear those contributions just before. How brilliant. So yes, I'm Vicky and this is Vikram that you can see, my collaborator in India, and Lav is also there, my other collaborator, both of them in India at the moment. So for this 15 minutes, what we're going to do is read some excerpts from a piece called Breath Carriers that I wrote some time back after making an expedition into the Sundarbans, which is the largest stretch of mangrove forest on Earth in the Bay of Bengal. And it was a group of artists and activists and scientists that went on this expedition, including Vikram and Lav. And so what I've written comes from that. But really, there have been many outputs, and this piece of text was just the beginning of something that has turned into a 10-year journey between us and others. So once we've read something, and I've got some images to show alongside, then Vikram will take the story on a bit and let you know what we're up to now, and we'd be very really delighted if you wanted to put any responses into the chat as we go along. So what I'm going to do right now is turn off my video, and Love's going to turn off his video, and I'm going to share my screen and we will begin to read. Okay. Okay. Turn off my video. Is it possible for the host to turn off my video?
I will try. We don't want to, I can only stop it.
I see. Sorry, I've got it. I've got it. There we go. Yeah. Okay. And share screen. Love, would you like to begin?
Sure. Think of a seedling on a high tide, a buoyant thing. The seed germinates before separating from the parent tree. This process is called vivipary, from the Latin vivus, to be alive, parere, to bring forth. The seed germinates inside the fruit of the tree, grows to maturity as a propagule. Together with the capsule that contains it, it drops from the parent. The tide catches it. It floats for a few months, drifts 100 miles, and eventually comes to rest on a bank.
Flight 199, BA Boeing 777. Flight distance 4,500 miles. Flight time 8 hours 50 minutes. Economy coach class. Tens of thousands of feet below us. The air in the cabin is dry and cold. My heart is freshly broken. I take a blanket out of its plastic wrapping and stare at the gin and tonic in front of me. We tear through the air. From Kolkata, we're driven by teenage boys in jeeps through dense fog, along uneven roads, water on either side. We board a boat, the first in a chain. The vessels only just hold together, their structures shift as we board. Diesel engines jerk into action, convulsions sending out shockwaves, gulping, gnashing, spitting out waste. Their noise hurtles towards the riverbanks, penetrates the forest. Deep in the Sundarbans, the noises return to us, an echo, a cackling.
The Sundarban, the Sundar one, Bengali Sundur, beautiful, one forest. The seedling takes root. It sheds its capsule coat and bud up. Radical root down, lodges in the mud. Once anchored, it produces additional roots, lateral, radiating. And from this network, as the seedling becomes a tree, vertical roots project. They stand sentry-like, as high as a meter from the waterlogged earth. Submerged by the tide for 12 hours a day, it is only when the water recedes that they get to work, taking in oxygen for distribution along osmotic pathways. The roots are known as pneumatophores, breath carriers.
In Kolkata, before we leave for the Sundarbans, I look for a map. On Google, a patchwork of satellite images reveals a shock of green, grey-blue trails weaving through it, the great rivers of the delta spilling into the Bay of Bengal, turning turquoise, ultramarine. According to Hindu mythology, when the goddess Ganga was ordered down to earth, infuriated at having to leave the party she was enjoying, she set off in a rage. Lord Shiva caught her fall, caught her torrent in the locks of his hair, then let the water loose, gently. It's the water sliding from Shiva's locks that I can see, and in between, hundreds of riverine islands.
The tree is a black mangrove. Black, the color of the bark and its heartwood, but its leaves appear white. Glands on their underside expel salt at night. And loaded with salt, the leaves fall, a sacrificial act. Unlike most plants, the mangrove has invested evolutionary energy adapting to intertidal conditions. An advantage to choosing saline waters, the lack of competition. The tree roots among others of its kind. Further up the bank, white mangroves. Below, red. Red mangroves balance on stilt-like roots, which lift the plants above low tide. White are served by pneumatophores, shorter than those of the black mangrove. The sum of these roots, black, white, red, the baffle effect. The mesh of the roots catches silt, mud, debris from the water flowing by. In this way, the trees build the land, they earth the islands. Their construction presents a breaker to the semi-diurnal tide. With varying force, the tides come knocking. The mangroves meet them and send them away, baffled.
Lokara Island was swallowed by the mouth of the Hooghly River, a distributary of the Ganges. The courses of rivers flowing through the delta change all the time, wearing at islands in different ways. There is increased flow of water from the Himalayas as glaciers melt at a greater rate. This, and the spread of damming, increases unpredictability of flow. Sea levels are rising as oceans warm, and I learn that the Indian plate is tipping gradually in a southerly direction, lowering the land. Add to that increased shipping along the Hooghly. All of this can overwhelm an island.
In amongst the roots of the tree, in the mud, shrimp, crabs, lobsters come to life. A nursery. Detritus from the tree, dead leaves, twigs, these provide food for young marine life. Further down the bank, in the roots that are continually submerged, barnacles, oysters, and sponges grow. A royal Bengal tiger emerges from the water, passes the nursery, and weaves silently through the trees into the thick of the forest. Jungle and fishing cats are its company, spotted deer and wild boar its prey. Further animation in the form of birds, a great egret in the branches of the trees above. In the murky waters coursing by, sawfish, butterfish, electric ray, dolphins, olive ridley turtles. a skipping frogfish climbs out of the water, crosses the mudflat, and climbs that tree.
Saga Island, downstream from Lorcacara and on the front line of tidal surge and storm damage. We stand on a beach. Palm trees felled by the sea, their stumps hollowed and darkened by seawater. Plastics cling to the wreckage of plant life. Concrete ruins by the water's edge, a village marked out by depressions in the sand, grooves filling with water as the tide comes in. Hundreds of thousands of red bricks, worn by the tide, are strewn along the shore. A fence of beaten bamboo sticks in front, and sandbags open, tossed about.
Alive are ready to bring forth.
The life has gone out of this place. The mangroves were cut back, concrete structures built in their place. Against the sea, they didn't last long. They were rebuilt further inland, a brick wall and a bamboo fence in front for protection. Again, they didn't last long. The wall, rebuilt 3 times. The village, destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed. A lament would be appropriate, but there is silence, marked only by the insistent sweep of the incoming tide. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much. It was extraordinary, extraordinary thing to be seeing, and an extraordinary thing to be hearing about. And you know, the fragility of that landscape, which looks wrecked now. Those attempts to hold back the tide just seems so utterly futile, really. Now Emma is started to sharing. I'm not sure why. Are we expecting to see another film? Yes, we are expecting another film from you, aren't we? No, she stopped again.
If I think Vikram may say a few words, and then I can see that the time is clicking on. So it may be that we show the first of the short videos, Richard, that we shared with you, and close it there.
Fine. Okay.
But if Vikram, are you able to come in?
We can't. Unfortunately, we
Seems
can't
like
hear
you're
you.
muted.
He's not though. I think he must be.
Yeah. Mm. Okay. I mean, while Vikram's trying to sort that audio issue, I would just say that I'm seeing some of the comments in the side there. Thank you very much for those. We've gone on as a group to keep on working on this. It's sort of got into our bloodstream, and there've been various outcomes, as I said before, in the UK with a group called Transport Theatre, and Vikram recently with Love made a piece with a group of performers in Cyprus, and what we're working on together is a way of kind of sharing a process of making work that others in other countries can pick up and bring their own environmental specifics to. I don't know, Vikram, if his audio has...
Am I
There he
audible
is.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's just the wonders of technology. So just to pick up from where Vicky left off, yes, we have gone on, and what I'm going to, since time is clicking on, what I'm going to leave you with is a trailer of a work that Love and I, along with another collaborator in India, made last December with the Buffer Fringe Festival in Cyprus. It's continued our work with the Sundarbans, and it's a part of a series of pieces that we are working on, which connects the Sundarbans to other parts of the world. Of course, with the climate crisis as a focus. This piece was made entirely via Zoom, of course, because it was not just, it was a lockdown and we couldn't get to Cyprus. So we have discovered new ways of working with people that we've never met. This was created with 5 Cypriot performers, and we were looking at the Cyprus situation, the Sundarban situation, drawing from our respective experiences, looking at literature, looking at myth, looking at music, looking at all sorts of things, really to try and create a piece together. And this is, as I said, the first of a series of pieces that we hope to make with this process and variations of this process in mind. So if you want to know more about it, do drop us a line. So if we can play the second video, it's called, I think, Trailer.
Think of a seedling. Thousands of seedlings. The river is a heavenly braid, an immense rope of water, unfurling through a wide and thirsty plain.
In my area, we had a beautiful line of tall trees. It was the jewel of the district. Everything was grey except from this beautiful line of tall trees.
अब की घर लौटा तो देखा वो नहीं था, वही बूढ़ा चौकीदार वृक्ष जो हमेशा मिलता था घर के दरवाजे पर तैनात।
Are you a Cypriot? The Cyprus buffer zone. A peace base. No. A temporary zone till peace is achieved. No. Peace is uncertain.
Cyclone Siddha, 2007. Cyclone Rashmi, 2008. Cyclone Ayla, 2009. Cyclone Koma, 2015. Cyclone Roano, 2016. Cyclone Mora, 2007. Cyclone Fani, 2009. Cyclone Bulbul, 2019. Cyclone Amphan, 2020. At that time, there was neither non-being nor being. The world was not, nor the heavens going beyond. What was contained? Where was it? In whose shelter? Was there water? Was there water deep and profound?
That's it from us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful to see, and the video captured the work reasonably, really quite well. No, dance work is difficult to capture, but the whole question of using performance to represent these kinds of questions is one that we'd love to explore much more.
Richard,
yes,
we've got a bit of spare time because I don't think Laura is here. So, I mean, I think that if Vicky and Vikram would like to carry on, or if anyone would like to ask them questions, that might be a really nice way to use some time.
Yes.
Oh, phew. We were feeling very tense because we'd gone over and we didn't want to take time from others. So that's
It's pure chance that that we seem to have lost Laura, who's coming in from New Zealand, and she hasn't appeared. So let's carry on.
I would love to say hello to Vicky and Vikram and Love. I'm Lucy. I'm joining in here, and
hi Lucy.
I must say that I've always wondered about mangroves because it's not
Lucy.
not a landscape that I've ever had any contact with. So it's always been something I've sort of imagined very badly, but I've understood their profound existence as being something so interdependent, you know, with every single aspect of that ecosystem. But I just want to thank you, because in those moments that you've conjured here, I feel I have taken into my soul every aspect of that ecosystem and how incredibly interactive in every single way. But I've also enjoyed listening to you, you know, watching you three, because there's a similar interaction, you know, between sort of the water and the air and the mangroves, and how you yourselves have conjured, you know, with this piece. And it would be fantastic to hear any one of you just sort of say how, you know, what your line of sight is from here going forward, because you must have learned so much in making this piece.
Well, I'll just jump in if you don't mind. Maybe just to take forward what Lucy was saying about the landscape and how interactive and sort of really vital it is to the survival of not just of the Sundarbans, but to Calcutta, where both Love and I are from. And Calcutta is just 100 kilometers from the sea, and the mangroves in the Sundarbans are what protect the city from the tides. Without that, the city would not exist. So maybe while I'm talking, if we can show the other video of my hand, because that also, Vicky ended with the photograph of the devastated part of the Sagar Islands. But the other side of Sagar, actually, they've done a lot of mangrove replantation, and it just is a different picture altogether. So it's just, you know, as an example of what's community consistent, determined community effort can do in that part of Sagar. For 20 years, they've been having mangrove replantations, and they do not face the same issues as the other side of the island, because the mangroves are there holding the soil in place. Of course, the tides are the same, the tide levels are rising, and that's a different issue altogether. But because they've ensured that the mangroves stay in place, the landscape is actually now protecting them rather than being something which they need to defend themselves against. As far as the work, I think for the three of us, we are working together on this project, A Multitude of Drops, which is not one project. It's sort of a series of ideas that we feed each other, and there are many strands to it. We've only shared one. But we have various other things that we're doing which are also connected to water. Like Love is working a lot on, I mean, you can talk about that, but working a lot on water usage and water scarcity in urban centers, specifically in India, and how that becomes a civic management issue, not just now, but in the past and into the future. Vicky's been working on issues relating to the climate crisis for, I don't know, longer than I've known you, I think. So there's, it's sort of become something that's brought three of us together. And the way we've been working over the last, not even a year yet, on the Multitude of Drops has really been feeding off each other. And in the trailer that I shared, Love and I and Omlan, of course, have worked to direct the piece. But Vicky was always coming in and out to sort of see how we were going, or read a script, to be the outside eye, those sort of things. And there's also other things that are in the pipeline. There's a, and even though all three of us come from performance, Love, of course, is an academic as well. We are not limiting ourselves to what expressions it can take. So there's also an artist's page that will appear in the next issue of Performance Research, which is on risk, I think. On risk, was it? So we're really sort of opening up and challenging ourselves as to how we can share the work. Yeah, so I'll stop there. So.
And Lav, how about you?
Well, there's actually so much to say, Lucy. It's so nice to meet you and so many others there. And it's a privilege to be here to share some of this work with you. I sort of just want to say that in addition to tidal protection, the mangroves, I mean, Calcutta was at the epicenter of a storm that hit us just about a year ago. We would not have been here if it wasn't for the mangroves. And what's striking for me is how so many urban dwellers continue to be unaware, almost deliberately unaware of the ecological richness which makes their existence possible. And from, coming at this from the academic side of things, is one of the amazing things that arts can do. They can distill research, they can distill academia, and create those soulful experiences that can make impactful change felt and realized and then sustained over a long period. So I think that's one of the other attractions for me. I enjoy academia, I enjoy reading and writing, but there's no denying that there's something special to the performing arts and what it can do in terms of catalyzing a certain kind of change and awareness.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. So thank you. And since we've got you, Lav, Bikram and Vicky, I just wonder if there are others that, having listened and watched, whether anybody here has a particular question they might like to ask. I'm now seeing who that might be. Anybody?
I can't see any hands. I think we're all good.
Okay. Well, I just want to kind of pick up on Lav's point, which is that I think we've really, truly tapped properly into the profound power, Lav, that you've touched on, which is how poetry, metaphor, film, image, creativity, the arts simply find a way to speak a different language, and how we can take, the whole world with us into the study of one small piece of mangrove that then tells us everything we need to know about everything, whether it's the science, whether it's the tides, whether it's how we've lived in the past, how we can live in the future. The smallest thing can give us the universe, and that is it's the shortcut to everything that we need to know. And more than that, it takes our hearts, and it's only everything, if we take everything into account globally, the crises that we face, we can't do in our minds, we can't manage it, but in our hearts we can take it all in a split second. And more than that, we can communicate with everybody and everything, and non-humans and the world. So I mean, the most important thing I want to say is just keep going. And actually, that's true of everything in high water. It's showing the true innate creativity in every single way we gather these up and cherish and witness it. So well done, and thank you.